Welcome to episode 3 of the UFL Tribune. It's me, Christopher. Once again, I am back, and there were football games played last weekend. Crazy. And I'm going to do a weird kind of combined power rankings and game recap section at the same time. That's what I'm going to do. And we're also going to go over my picks for week 2 of the UFL, and who I think is going to win the game slated for week 2. And also some bonus stuff thrown in there like usual. So, yeah, we're just going to get straight into it with my weird combined week recap and power ranking section at once. But it's primarily power rankings. So we're just going to get straight into my 8th place in the power rankings. And as much as it hurts, my 8th place in my power rankings is my very own DC Defenders. So, the DC Defenders, in week 1 of the UFL season, I predicted them to absolutely smoke the Brahmas. That did not happen. The Defenders ended up being the only team to not score a touchdown at all. So, pretty far off from my predictions. Jordan Teamu was actually had the most passing yards out of anyone in the UFL in week 1, with 235. The issue, it took him 45 passes to get there. So, it's less he had a lot of passing yards because he was just slinging the ball around like crazy very accurately, and more because the Defenders were losing the entire game and we were just passing a lot. Along with his 235 yards, he also was picked off one time and, as previously stated, threw 0 touchdowns, and the whole team still did not score a touchdown. Now, if we're being technical, he did have a touchdown pass taken off the board to Kiki QT, which could have helped tie the game, but Gene DeLance was busy spitting on people and being offsides, so that touchdown ended up not counting. But that's not even the first issue with the Defenders. They also just had, no rush game at all. Cameron Harris had 8 rushes for 21 yards, which that was the Defenders' leading rusher, so I'm pretty sure that could tell you how little running game they were able to get out on the field. I thought that the loss of Abram Smith wouldn't hurt the Defenders that much, but it is really hurting them from the looks of things. Aside from that, the receivers weren't terrible. Ty Scott led the team in receiving with 87 yards on 4 receptions. He had 1 big catch, accounting for a lot of those yards, though. And Brandon Smith also had a respectable day with 4 receptions for 47 yards. And along with that, the Defenders' defense was able to muster up 1 turnover. It was Isaiah Johnson forced 1 fumble, but that fumble only ended up resulting in a field goal, so it didn't really affect the score that much. Speaking of field goals, though, one sole bright spot for the Defenders was their kicker. Matthew McCrane went 4 for 4 on field goals, accounting for every single Defenders point that was scored last Sunday. So, if you need one bright spot to take away from this, fellow DC fans, our kicker's pretty good. So, DC is at the bottom of my power rankings because they were just thoroughly outplayed on pretty much every level by the San Antonio Brahmas last Sunday. So, they scored the least points out of any team, and I think also were tied for letting up the most points. So, they just really didn't show much life out there at all. So, that's why DC is ranked 8th place in my power rankings after week 1. Next up, in 7th place, I have the St. Louis Battlehawks. I saw some people had the Battlehawks up at 5 as the best losing team. I don't see it. I have them down at 7. To start, AJ McCarron also had a pretty alright day passing the ball. He was actually the only quarterback to have multiple touchdown passes, despite the fact his team lost. He also had 216 yards, going 24 for 37 on passing attempts. Wayne Gallman had an okay day with 13 rushes for 40 yards. Definitely better than whatever the Defenders were doing, but still not an incredible day. Markel Atman led the Battlehawks in reception yards with 60 and also had a touchdown right at the end of the game that could have gotten the Battlehawks to win if Jake Bates didn't just casually kick a 64-yard field goal to get the Panthers to win. Along with Markel Atman, Darius Shepard also a pretty good, well, not good, but decent day. 5 receptions for 34 yards, no touchdown though. And Jake Sutherland was the player who caught AJ McCarron's other touchdown. But total, he had a pretty mediocre day as well. 3 receptions for 45 yards. Had 1 big catch, though. Mike Rose also had a pretty good interception on E.J. Perry. The Battlehawks forced 2 interceptions on the day of E.J. Perry. One coming from Mike Rose, and the other coming from Quinintero Cole. But his interception was less because he made a play on the ball and more because the ball made a play on him. It deflected off of a Panthers receiver and kind of just went straight into his hands. So, but they did force 2 interceptions on the day. The Battlehawks overall, they did not look good in the first half. They definitely looked better in the second half, but I still don't think that they put up too much of a fight, and they also lost the game. So that's why I got St. Louis down at 7. Now, it wasn't an easy choice for 6th place. I was actually going back and forth between St. Louis and this team for 6th and 7th quite a lot when making these rankings, but I decided to give the edge to my 6th place team, the Houston Roughnecks, mainly because I know this doesn't affect the actual game that they played, but they were down their, offensive player of the year in the USFL running back, Mark Thompson, and he should be back this week against the Defenders. So that honestly is the only reason why I gave the Roughnecks a slight edge over the Battlehawks, because they both did not play very good games. But Houston, Jarrett Garantano, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, still not 100% sure. He had 16 completions on 21 attempts, 157 passing yards, and the Roughnecks' only touchdown, which was not a passing touchdown, but a rushing touchdown on a quarterback sneak. TJ Pledger, the guy filling in for Mark Thompson at running back, was able to get 15 rushing yards on 6 attempts, so not exactly what you're looking for in your running back's performance, but he is the second-string running back behind Mark Thompson, so I don't think the expectations were that high. Their other running back, Kirk Merritt, though, honestly made more of an impact in the passing game and not the rushing game with 4 receptions for 33 yards. He was actually their leading receiver, receiving yards-wise, but Braden Bowman was their leading receiver that was like an actual receiving type player. Still not an actual receiver. He's a tight end, but he had 2 receptions for 23 yards. But despite how bad all of these stats sound for how the Roughnecks played, there is a reason that their game against the Showboats was decently close and they had a chance to win it in the end, is because of one man on the defense specifically, Reuben Foster, who had an interception, 3 sacks, and 7 tackles for loss. He had an incredible individual performance, but he also got hurt near the end of the game. But from what we are hearing, it is not a serious injury. He will be back very soon. So, but Reuben Foster pretty much individually kept them in this game with, again, his 1 interception on Case Cookus, 3 sacks on Case Cookus. He was basically playing for the entire defense out there. But you might be wondering, well, I said Houston had a chance to win this game at the end, and that is mainly because of their defense led by Reuben Foster, because they actually got a stop on the Showboats offense, forcing them to a field goal. Field goal team comes on, Showboats missed the field goal, but the Roughnecks field goal blocking squad ended up being offside, giving the Showboats another first down. Then the Roughnecks defense holds the Showboats again and makes them punt. They actually push them out of field goal range, and then in another incredible display of special teams by the Roughnecks, they proceed to muff the punt, Showboats recover, and the Showboats win the ball game. So the defense actually did keep them in the game up until the very end. It's just back-to-back blunders by the Roughnecks special teams squad ended up costing them the game. All of that combined is what has placed the Houston Roughnecks at 6th place on my power rankings. And now, the best of the losing teams from this week. In 5th place, I have the Arlington Renegades. In my opinion, the Arlington Renegades played the best of any of the losing teams. We'll start off how I've started all of them, with Luis Perez, who went 19 for 28 passing for 214 yards, a touchdown, an interception, and he also had a fumble on the opening drive. All those turnovers might not sound the best, but he actually played a pretty good first half, minus the fumble on the opening drive. His 1 touchdown was also a 50-yard bomb to Isaiah Winstead, who Winstead himself only actually had 2 receptions for 60 yards. That 1 50-yard catch accounting for about 90% of his receiving yards on the day, but it was a pretty impressive play. Now, the running back duo of Letty Brown and Davon Smith proved to not be the most effective. Letty Brown had 8 rushing attempts for 30 yards. Davon Smith, 7 rushing attempts for 17 yards. Letty Brown was definitely the better of the two, but it only accounted for 47 total rushing yards from their running backs, which is not the best performance. Dante Burnett was their second leading receiver with 36 yards on 5 receptions. And the Renegades defense also looked pretty good with 2 interceptions coming from Deron Lowe and Darren Evans, respectively. Deron Lowe picking off Matt Corral, and Darren Evans picking off Adrian Martinez. Now, the Renegades looked pretty dominant over the Stallions in the first half of this game. It took a pretty impressive touchdown pass from Matt Corral to Deion Kane to even tie the game at 11 at halftime. But the Renegades' offense just stalled out in the second half. They only scored 3 points in the entire second half of the ball game, and Stallions scored 2 touchdowns in the second half of the ball game, which led Birmingham to kind of run away with the game. In fact, I just want to mention this now. That Matt Corral to Deion Kane touchdown pass right before halftime, we held a poll on the UFL Tribune Twitter, and that ended up being our play of the week voted by the fans. I don't know if that's because the play was impressive or more because for some reason our entire Twitter following is made up of Birmingham Stallions fans. But nonetheless, it was voted the top play of the week. So if you want to vote in that poll next week, maybe to stop my polls from being only voted on by Stallions fans, be sure to follow the UFL Tribune on Twitter. That is at the UFL Tribune on Twitter. Give us a follow, and you can vote next week for what you think the best play of week 2 was when those plays eventually happen. But I'm getting sidetracked. Let's get into back to the power rankings. The first of the winning teams this week, in 4th place, I have the Michigan Panthers. We'll start with E.J. Perry, who went 12 for 24 on passing attempts with 176 yards. Now, he did have 2 interceptions, but he made up for those 2 interceptions with 2 rushing touchdowns. Can we call E.J. Perry Vanilla Vic? Who knows? But he also had 4 other rushing attempts aside from those 2 touchdowns, and for a total of 17 rushing yards on the day. Quick fun E.J. Perry stat. He has started 3 games for the Michigan Panthers, and in those games, he has 4 rushing touchdowns. He actually has more rushing touchdowns than games started for the Panthers. I just think that's kind of funny. He wasn't the Panthers' only star rushing the ball, though, as Wes Hills also had himself a day. Despite not scoring a touchdown, he had 11 rushes for 85 yards, including 2 big runs near the end of the game to set up that second E.J. Perry touchdown run, and he was crucial to the Panthers' win over the St. Louis Battlehawks. Devin Ross on the day also had 2 receptions for 46 yards. He was their leading receiver. And Marcus Sims also had 2 receptions for 38 yards. The Panthers did not pass the ball too much. They weren't that effective. You know, E.J. Perry had 2 interceptions and had the second least passing yards out of any of the starting quarterbacks on the day. But when they were running the ball well. The other thing that helped the Panthers really win their game was their resounding defense. They had 6 total tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, and the other thing that really helped the Panthers win this game, I can't talk about the Panthers win and not mention Jake Bates. Absolute legend, and he literally has been on the field for about 1 total scrimmage play. Jake Bates, who did not kick a single field goal in college, came out onto this field with 8 seconds left, down 1 point to the Battlehawks, and drills a 64-yard field goal that didn't count because he got iced. So he just walks back out on the field, drills a second 64-yard field goal, and that ended up giving the Panthers the edge over the Battlehawks. The fact that man the coaches at the college he went to, I don't know what they were thinking. But I don't know how he just literally did not ever kick a field goal while he was in college. But Jake Bates, instant UFL legend right there for his 1 scrimmage play in week 1. 64-yard field goal is just crazy. But moving on to the 3rd place in my power rankings, I have the Memphis Showboats. Now, the Memphis Showboats had pretty much the exact opposite game to the Michigan Panthers. Case Cookus, he was cooking with 23 for 40 on passing attempts for 204 total yards and a touchdown. Insane toe drag to Vinny Papali. And along with that, he was actually the Showboats' leading rusher with a whopping 16 yards. You might be wondering, well, wait, if Case was the leading rusher with only 16 yards, how many yards did their actual number 1 running back have, Darius Victor? Glad you asked. Darius Victor, on 10 rushes, managed a whopping 3 yards. The Showboats were unable to run the ball effectively pretty much the entire game. So that kind of led to Case Cookus kind of just being the leading rusher by default because he had like 1 good rushing play. But that really did not matter because what the Showboats were able to do in the passing game kind of made up for what they were unable to do in the rushing game. Vinny Papali ended up being their leading receiver yards-wise with 4 receptions. He had 46 yards and the previously mentioned insane toe drag touchdown that was also in the play of the week poll, but ended up losing. But we're not going to overshadow also Dawood Davis with 43 yards, just lower than Vince Papale. He had 7 receptions, though, which was more than Papale. And both those guys were crucial to the Showboats' passing attack that really made up for their lack of a rushing game. We also cannot forget about Christian McFarland, who scored the Showboats' first touchdown of the season on a fumble return when Isaiah Henney fumbled the ball and Christian McFarland picked it up, returned it to the end zone, touchdown. And that was also a crucial play because the game did end up coming down to 1 score. So while the Showboats probably did not have really any rushing game at all, I feel like their passing game sure enough made up for it because they got the win, and it was also just a really good passing game in general. So that has me putting the Memphis Showboats at 3 overall. Now we're getting pretty close to the top of the power rankings now. Number 2, I have the San Antonio Brahmas. I expected this team to get completely blown out by the defenders, and the exact opposite ended up happening. We'll start with Chase Garbers. I called him Chase Gabbers last week. Yeah, that's definitely not his name. Chase Garbers went 19 for 25 on passing for 158 yards, which was actually the lowest of the week, but he honestly probably played the best. Well, I wouldn't say the best, but he probably played one of the best games as quarterback this week with 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. Anthony McFarland was also just killing the DC defense on the ground. He had 9 rushes for 47 yards, and he also had 1 reception for 28 yards that went for a touchdown. Their leading receiver on the day ended up being John Trey Kirkland, who had 8 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. But if we want to talk about Brahmas scoring touchdowns, we cannot forget to bring up the fake field goal touchdown from Brad Wing to the center, Alex Millette, for about I think it was 50-yard touchdown, which is the most ridiculous play I've probably ever seen go down. The punter goes to his 3rd read, which is the center playing tight end, and the center catches it, not in the end zone, but 15 yards away from it, and then runs to the end zone himself, just barely getting in the end zone for a touchdown. Most ridiculous play I've ever seen, and even though it happened against my team, that was also probably one of the coolest plays I've ever seen, not gonna lie. The Brahmas also showed out on defense with an 89-yard interception that was secured by Nate Wieland. That was right after the taken away touchdown from Teamu to Kiki QT that was taken away because the defenders did like everything you're not supposed to do on an offensive play on every level. Right after that, 89-yard interception for the Brahmas. It was not a fun day for the defenders. Fun day for the Brahmas, though, which is why they're ranked number 2 in my power rankings. And number 1 in my power rankings for week 1 of the UFL season, I have the 2-time defending back-to-back USFL champions, Birmingham Stallions, who were led by Matt Corral, who played most of the game at quarterback. They had Adrian Martinez in there for, I think, 2 drives, but Matt Corral played most of the game, which lowered his passing numbers a bit, but he did have, he went 12 for 21 on passing for a touchdown, and he also had 201 passing yards on the day total. His leading receiver was Deion Kane, who had 3 receptions for 66 yards, and also that 1 touchdown, that 1 got voted play of the week, but 2 tied the game. Well, it didn't tie the game, but helped tie the game right before halftime. CJ Marable was also had a pretty good day with 18 rushing yards for 67 yards and a touchdown, along with, I think his name is Ricky Persons, also had a touchdown rushing the ball for the Stallions. And Mark Gilbert also had an interception of Luis Perez, very close to the end of the game to help seal the deal for the Stallions' win. And I'm also not going to forget that Carlos Davis also had a sack in the game. Now, Birmingham also scored, well, they tied San Antonio for the most points scored in a game this weekend with 27. And although they technically actually had the second least points given up, San Antonio only let up 12 points, while Birmingham let up 14. I feel like Birmingham's defense got stronger as the game went on, while San Antonio's was more of just like a straight, they were just good the entire time. I feel like Birmingham had the stronger defensive performance in that second half when they were more in rhythm and warmed up, which is why I've placed Birmingham just above the Brahmas in the power rankings at spot number 1. And with that, those are my power rankings for week 1. In 8th place, I have the Defenders. 7th place, I have the Battlehawks. 6th place, I have the Roughnecks. 5th place, I have the Renegades. 4th place, I have the Panthers. Third place, I have the Showboats. Second place, I have the Brahmas. And first place, I have the Birmingham Stallions. So now that we've got that covered, I'm actually going to talk about one other quick small thing before we get into my game picks for week 2, which is I, for some reason, seem to bring up UFL merchandise at least once every episode. We've only done 3 episodes, and I've brought it up in all 3 episodes, so I guess this is just going to be a recurring theme. It just annoys me how, if you have watched any of the UFL games this weekend, you probably saw that advertisement they were airing for UFL merchandise, and that advertisement for UFL merchandise had jerseys in it, but they still do not actually sell jerseys on the website. The former USFL teams now have the jerseys from last year being sold on the website. I guess they just had overstock in some warehouse somewhere and decided to try and sell them out. But it's kind of funny because the Showboats jersey, that's not even what their jersey looks like anymore, but they're still selling them. So, but they still don't have the new jerseys. And they literally have a picture of a new looking Stallions UFL jersey in the advertisement, but they're still not selling them. This is just very annoying to me. I want to buy jerseys, but I literally can't. But, that's a side issue. I just want to bring it up. Now I'm going to get into my game picks for week 2 of the United Football League season. So, we will be kicking off the week with a battle of 2 teams who got wins in week 1. Actually, every game this week is either a matchup of teams that got a win in week 1 or a matchup of teams that got a loss in week 1. And we're kicking off with a win versus win matchup with the San Antonio Brahmas going to Memphis to play the Showboats. And in this game, I think I'm feeling a Showboats win to kick off the week. I feel like the Showboats offense, passing-wise, was better than the Brahmas offense. Now, the running game could be a question, but I feel like the Showboats defense is probably better than whatever the Defenders defense was doing last Saturday. So I feel like they might not be as effective as they were against the Defenders. And also, back on the offensive side of the ball, I feel like from an experience standpoint, Chase Garbers has like 1 start. He was very good in that 1 start last Sunday, but I feel like going up against Case Cookus, he's proven that he can be a very good quarterback on multiple occasions, and he has 2 entire seasons of experience playing in Spring League football, along with the game he just played last Sunday as well. So, along with all of that, it's also a Memphis home game, so I feel like all of those are just going to combine together. And the experience, the defense, the offense, the passing game, it's all going to combine together. I feel like the Showboats are going to get the win. Now, one thing I do want to see from the Showboats, though, they might be able to get the win without this. But one thing that will definitely help is, can they get any sort of running game going? Because they were unable to do that against Houston. So, if the Showboats can get a running game going, they will definitely beat the Brahmas. But they even still might not, even if they don't get the running game going. Even without a running game, they still might beat the Brahmas, if you're asking me, because of all the other factors. So, that's why I think the Showboats are most likely going to get the win versus the Brahmas to kick off the week. The second game we have this week is going to be the Arlington Renegades going to St. Louis to play the Battlehawks. Now, this is our first matchup of loss versus loss, and despite the fact I ranked Arlington higher in the power rankings because I thought they played better, I actually think this is going to be a St. Louis win, because despite the fact that I had St. Louis ranked so low, their offense did look a lot better in the second half of the game than it did in the first half, and A.J. McCarron was one of the 2 quarterbacks to throw 2 touchdowns, so I feel like A.J. McCarron, he's going to bounce off of more second half A.J. McCarron from their first game, and not so much first half A.J. McCarron from their first game, so I feel like the St. Louis offense is going to be able to make a lot of plays versus that Arlington Renegades defense. Now, not to discount the Renegades offense, I feel like with Luis Perez at the helm, the Renegades offense can be very good, but I just think they're going to be outplayed by the Battlehawks overall, because their defense did also look pretty good last week. They did have 2 interceptions on E.J. Perry. Now, Luis Perez is probably, just a bit better, than E.J. Perry, but I feel like the Battlehawks defense is going to be able to hold strong against the Renegades offense. And on top of all that, it's also a St. Louis home game. St. Louis draws in the most fans out of literally any other team in the league. They have a ton of fans at their game, so I feel like that also is going to spark the team, and it's going to make the Renegades offense, perform slightly less. So that is all the factors, I believe, why the Battlehawks are going to get a win over the Renegades this Saturday. I'm pretty sure that game's being played on Saturday. That's why I think the Battlehawks are going to beat the Renegades. Now, next up, I have the Birmingham Stallions going to Detroit to play the Panthers. Now, these are two teams that got wins in week one. One team looked a lot better than the other team. Stallions looked a lot better than the Panthers. But, and I do think the Stallions are going to get a win over the Michigan Panthers. It is a Panthers home game, but I don't think that's going to matter. Now, if you asked me what I thought the score of this game was going to be before week one happened, I would have told you the Stallions are winning by like 50 points. But the Panthers looked a lot better than I thought they would look. I thought the Panthers, honestly, I made predictions like before the season started. I had the Panthers going 2-8. I'll be honest. If you had me make predictions for the entire season now, Panthers definitely not going 2-8. Panthers performed a lot better than I thought they would against the Battlehawks. They got the win. But even despite that, I still think the Stallions are pretty much just better on every level. So it's definitely going to be a lot closer. Stallions are going to win by like 10 to 15 points. But Panthers, it's a lot better than I thought you were going to perform. So take positives in my slew of negatives about your team. But yeah, even despite that, I think the Stallions are going to get a pretty strong victory against the Michigan Panthers. And we are finally closing out the week with the Roughnecks going to D.C. to play the D.C. Defenders. And I think this game is going to be a bounce-back game for the D.C. Defenders. They're going to get the win. Because I feel like the Defenders' defense, I know I just said that they didn't play very good. I feel like, when you got a bit of experience in rhythm, they still have a lot of playmakers on that defense that I feel like could show up. And, the Defenders' offense, when they actually had 2 touchdowns in the game against the Brahmas, both were called back for penalties, and they did have some splash plays. It's just they were just unable to get in the end zone. They kept making mistakes whenever they'd get close to the end zone, leading to, well, it actually led to Matthew McCrane having a pretty good day on field goals, going 4 for 4, but it did not lead to a win. Matthew McCrane is unfortunately not Luis Aguilar, and you cannot have him be your entire points scored to win the football game. But the Roughnecks offense, the Roughnecks are just not a very good football team. I'm just being honest. Their offense is just not that good. So I feel like the Roughnecks are going up against the Defenders. I feel like the Defenders' defense is going to be able to get a lot of stops on that Houston offense. So Houston's defense is actually pretty good, especially with Reuben Foster, but I feel like the Defenders' defense is going to be able to get to the end zone and score more than that Roughnecks defense is, what Roughnecks offense is against that Defenders' defense. And on top of all that, too, it's a Defenders' home game. The Defenders do not lose at Audi Field. It just doesn't happen. So that is why I believe DC Defenders, they're going to be getting a win against the Houston Roughnecks to close out week 2 of the UFL. I was going to say week 2 of the UFL season. That's actually correct, yeah. To close out week 2 of the UFL season. So, yeah. So that's pretty much all we had for today's show. There was no real news to cover that I didn't just cover in the power rankings and predictions. So that's pretty much all the news we got to cover. I will add one more quick reminder here that if you want to mail into the show, I will talk about it. Just send us a DM on Twitter about anything you want to say about the UFL. I'll read it on the show. You can be anonymous if you request. If you want to be anonymous, just tell me in the DM. I won't say your name. I will say your name if you would like me to. But, yeah, just DM at the UFL Tribune on Twitter. You can mail back in. I'll review your take or something. I don't know. But, yeah, I just wanted to get that plug in before we left. So yeah, that is pretty much all I have for today's episode. I will see you next week for power rankings again, week 2 predictions, any news I want to talk about. And yeah, so I hope that you tune in next time for episode 4 of the UFL Tribune next week. Cut.